Morning everyone, welcome back to another video. It's the last Sunday of October and the clocks went back last night, so we've just come out to enjoy a bit of morning sun, take the dog for a quick walk, which has been a bit of a nuisance. She won't leave the ducks alone. So we've just come out to check on a bit of storm damage and that we had the other week, show you around. We've also got to swap the sheep over because we've got two of them going next week, so they'll be going in the freezer the following weekend. So we're going to get them in the paddock where there's plenty of grass, give them a good last week on here before two of them go. So we're just going to have a look about the place, show you around and see what we've got going on.
Stephen's just gone to open the shed up there so that the sheep can know that they can use that in the winter months if it gets really harsh weather. It's not due to be harsh weather at all now. We've actually got a week or so of some nice winter sun, which is really nice. And we also got asked, why is Annie on a lead sometimes, which is she goes off the lead where there's no animals around that she can get to. But as Stephen's just alluded to, she can be a royal pain sometimes when she's off the lead with the animals. So we keep her on the lead and things generally work out.
Just before I let the sheep in, they haven't actually been in this paddock this year because I don't know if you remember, we seeded all this area here just to the side of me. That was all just solid mud. So we seeded that earlier in the year and there's not been anything on that apart from a few chickens scratting about in the place. So we're going to let them in now because they've been in that paddock that they're in all spring and summer. So they'll be hopefully keen as custard to get in here and get on this grass. How sheep? All right, Nettle.
Where's number 4?
She's coming, I can hear her. So just coincidentally, these two here are going to be the lambs for the freezer. I mean, the big one there will make a good lamb, but this one's never made anything, so we're not expecting much out of her at all. Them two behind me are our pet lambs, which will stay with us until old age gets them. But yeah, these two here will be the ones for the freezer next week. Right, come on. Right, so on a previous video I showed you around where we let the sheep in here before we knew what we were doing, and they chewed a lot of the bark off the trees, so a lot of them in here are dead. You can see behind me a few of them have fell right down now, so I need to get on with them at some point and cut them up for firewood. As you saw in the end of last week's video, we had a storm coming. Well, luckily, or thankfully, it didn't do much damage. It just took this tree down. A previous one that we had took half of it down, and then that one came along and just took the other half down. So it's not hurting anybody, it's just resting on the other tree, so I'll probably just leave that till it actually dies itself, and then I'll just cut that one down, because you leave them to season while they're stood upright. You don't have to cut them all up and stack them while they're season. So thankfully, that's all we got. We got quite a lot of rain, which flooded the field a bit where the horses are in, but not as much as it did last year when the whole shed and everything was underwater. So small wins, anyway, for storms, as far as storms go.
As Stephen was alluding to, there's no mad rush to get to those trees. We've got plenty of firewood to get into the house and see us through, well, multiple winters. I think we've mentioned that before, so we're really lucky in that sense. This tree will become firewood, as will the other trees that have already died and need chopping down. But it's not, Stephen's checked it, it's not causing a safety concern or anything like that. So as with everything on the small holding, it's about prioritising the jobs. And because the clocks went back last night and we've got a lot less daylight at the moment, all of the winter prep that we've been doing has been feeding into this moment. So getting everything ready outside, getting the horses ready to come in, making sure everything's safe for the animals, and also making sure we've got as many of the garden produce harvested and into the kitchen and into stores as possible. So everything's been feeding into that, as I say, which just makes it easier for us, because at the moment we're going to work in the dark and we're coming home from the dark. No, we're not. We're going to work in the dark and we're coming home in the dark. So it's all about preparation, and our attentions now can turn to what we've got going on inside. And as you might be able to see from the colour of Stephen, he's in the middle of decorating at the moment. So we'll take you along, because there's a couple of interesting things that we're doing there, or at least we find interesting and would like to share with you. But at the moment, as I say, the sun's shining for the next week or so, but then the temperatures are going to be plummeting. We'll be looking at getting the AGA back on, which I can't wait for. We've talked about that on previous videos. So we're going to get some prep done for that in the house, as well as other things. But before we do any of that, let's go and have a look at how our food supplies are doing. Well, here we are in one of my favourite places of the whole small holding, and that is where we store our winter produce. So In here you can see, I'll show you around in just a second, but this is where we bring in the vegetables that are for storage over the winter. Some things will get stored on the shelves. These shelves at the moment have just got the glass jars on them because everything is kind of going into the house. But these are for the jars that are spare and also for any overflow that we hope to have once things are getting preserved, which is generally throughout the month of November. Just as a side note, I try and freeze as much as I can if I can't get to it straight away, so that when I can get to it, it's obviously there waiting for me in the freezer. The bad thing about that though, obviously, is it takes up freezer room, which is really important for us at this time of the year as well. We're going to need to make more space, as Stephen said, for those lambs that we've got coming in too, but more of that on another video. So what have we got going on in here? Do you remember the onions that we harvested? That's some of them. These are some of the potatoes that we've got going in, so let's have a closer inspection on them. Now this isn't all of our onions by any means, but I just wanted to show you how they are holding up. And thankfully, I mean, given it has only been a couple of weeks, this is what I would expect. They are doing absolutely fine. They feel just as firm as the day that they came out of the ground. So fingers crossed we'll have a year's worth of onions. As I say, they're not all here. We've got them in different locations as well. These are the potatoes that we're starting to sort and go through. And what I mean by sorting them is because, as you will see, some of them have started to rot. If they've already had, this clearly is either split or had a spade in it or something. I think it's split because the amount of water and how quickly it was growing. And you can see some of the other ones, I've left these out to show you, have already started to mould. Now, I think that some of the plants had got blight and I hadn't noticed, because they certainly didn't look blighty to me when I was obviously checking on them. But these potatoes are already starting to show sort of rotting from the inside, and that's a clear sign of blight for me. I mean, in a day or two, this will be super soft, and at the moment it's not, but the discoloration on it is telling me this here is kind of what I've noticed on blighted potatoes in previous experience. So I'm making sure that we get all of those out. We've got other ones here. It's pitch black in here, by the way, when we're not in here with the light on, so they do absolutely perfect in here. We've got the pink furs at the back, which we're getting into first. They're really nice. Actually, we've never had these before, but they are really nice. We're really enjoying having those. So these potatoes are one of the first lot that came in. I keep going through them all just to make sure that I haven't missed any that are going soft or that are moulding, and these ones are the ones that are smaller and just get used as and when we can. I've just noticed there's one here that's starting to mould, look at that, and once they start they go really quickly. We've also got more potatoes under here, so if we go underneath, there's whole trays under here and there, and I've got more to come in too. So we think that we might be doing okay for potatoes and onions. I didn't mention it on a previous video, but these are the originals. I didn't mention the red onions. And for those that might be wondering, because they've been here a while, we did harvest red onions in the sort of the end of the summer, quite a few, and some of these ones too. So these are the ones that we're tending to go through first. And the reason some of these were in here is these were actually showing signs of mould, which this one is already. At this, again, just after a few days, it's starting to go quite bad. So that'll end up going to the compost. I will see if I can salvage anything off it, but that's why these are in here, to make sure that they get used up first. And it's a case of coming in regularly, every day or so, every couple of days, and just checking through to see how things are doing, because one, as they always say, one bad apple and it can lose everything. Another crop that we've got in here is the garlic. The garlic was abysmal this year. We still have quite a bit, but for the amount that I've grown, it's nowhere near what I was expecting. So obviously we'll just get through that and use that, and whenever it's gone, it's gone. So fingers crossed there's also a year's worth of garlic there. I'm going to get to preserving some of that too. And what I've also been doing for some of the potatoes that I'm a little bit concerned about, where they're not showing necessarily, they're obviously not moulding or bad or anything like that, but where I'm thinking if they've maybe got a hole in or they've suffered some damage where we've been harvesting them, I've been preserving those as well. So I'll either freeze them, which we don't have much room in the freezers at the minute, or I'll get them into jars on the shelves. So I'll show you that if anybody's interested in that. So overall, out here, things are looking fantastic. That's just on the surface. If we go in the house and scratch beneath that surface, there's trouble brewing. Let's go and have a look. Now this is where we are keeping our absolutely fabulous winter squash. So we've got all different varieties in here. If you saw that when we were harvesting it, but look how quickly things can change. This is a fine example of something starting to rot, and we didn't even notice that when it first started happening. It was only once it had got a little bit too far gone. I will be seeing what I can salvage of that. So that made me go through all of the rest of them, which are looking okay in here, except for this one, which I'm sure you could put your finger through that if you tried. So let's go and have a look at the rest. Now in here on our dresser we've got some more of the onions. I can keep a close eye on these. I've also got some in the kitchen. Despite it being a little bit warmer in here, they've been absolutely fine. Again, whatever needs using up first, I've just seen one there that can probably be used up sooner than the others. That will make sure that that happens. So I'm going to leave that there because I'll get to that. And also the squash we've been starting to eat through. But if you look closely, we're already seeing some of them start to rot. Now, Stephen's just noticed this one and mentioned it to me. Now, the reason is, I'm not panicking about this. As I said, when we were harvesting them, there's certain ways that you harvest and leave as much stock on as possible. But if some of them have had a hard time, or if there's already been a blemish on them, then bringing them in will just exacerbate that and make them rot a lot more quickly. So my job today is to turn the rest of these into something edible so that they don't go to waste. Well, we've got a really busy afternoon in the kitchen, and as soon as I came in to get these guys chopped up, everybody wanted feeding, and actually it's worked out really well because it's helped me figure out what I'm going to be doing with these. This is our leftovers from lunch. I made a sweet potato and carrot soup, so we've got tons of our own carrots, use those, and we've got some shop bought sweet potatoes left over in the pantry. Sweet potatoes aren't something that we grow here on the Smallholding, so it is one of the vegetables that we buy extra if we need to. But obviously now we've got the squash, I can get those finished and clear everything that's in the pantry and concentrate purely on what we've got here. And the reason that I wanted to show you this is I made this soup in the soup maker and it's absolutely delicious. Normally I'll just bung that in there, and I didn't think it was going to taste as nice because we didn't saute the veggies, etc, etc. But it is really, really nice and everybody enjoyed it, which is a bonus. So I'm going to start getting these chopped up, and I'm going to ask Stephen to come in and give us a hand chopping the really big one, because that's probably he's less likely to take a finger off than I am. So this one here is one of the small hubbards. I don't think this is an ute, but it looks absolutely delicious. Very nice colour in there. And this is another, you can see the problems that we're having. Look at the state of that. So I'm going to cut this well underneath any of that line that suggests that there's bad flesh. Oops, that went through really quickly. It's obviously worse than that first one. However, there's plenty there underneath. So can you see this is the line here where it's a lot softer, and underneath here is still perfectly usable. So I'll make sure I get all of that scraped out. But they look very similar inside. So I'm thinking they're both the same variety, both hubbards. One of these little acorn guys is starting to mould on the outside. I think that's purely on the outside at the moment, so I'm going to be careful getting into that one and get maybe a smaller knife doing that. And then this all won't go to waste though, so all this yucky stuff here won't go to waste. That'll go back into the compost and back into the land for next year. What is interesting is I made this soup in the soup maker just because I needed it really, really quickly and I needed it hands off. And it was that nice, I'm actually going to use the rest of this squash in the soup maker and make some of that soup, which I'll have to find space in the freezer for all the same. So let's get on with that. The other thing that I added to it, what's in the bottom of here, I'm in the middle of making a fermented hot chilli sauce. What's in the bottom of here is some of our own chilies, and I threw one of those in the soup as well. So a fantastic homegrown soup, absolutely delicious. I'm going to get on and get the rest of these chopped up and ask Stephen, who's just coming in now because he's going to be working on the AGA, to see if he can chop up that bigger pumpkin and see any others that have unfortunately got blemishes on. So let's crack on. Oh, there's a great bed in there.
This one?
Is it the one closest to the door?
Yeah.
Has it got a blemish on it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it. If you can do that one, I'll look at that one at the end, please.
What do you want me to do with that?
Oh, chop it off.
Yeah. Chop it up in what way?
Well, probably. I mean, do you want to just cut that bit out and see how bad it is?
I'll just cut it that way.
Basically, people normally slice these. It might be a musky crab, that one, you know.
Slice them in what way?
Like, okay.
Where's that big black knife?
How would you want it cut?
Well, we need to be able to cut it small, so I guess you want to just cut that out and see how bad it is inside, and then it's going to be...
No, because I was just going to cut it
I'll do it, do what you think's best.
right down the line. So I've done that cut then, like that.
Wait, yeah, I need to be able to peel it, so what do you think? Wait, maybe it's just like a cake, yeah? And then... Oh my god, there's absolutely tons of flesh in that. Isn't there? That's the blemish that was on this big pumpkin, and I didn't appreciate quite how much flesh was going to be on it. So thank goodness there's a butcher in the house to help chop it up.
You got some plenty of recipes for it.
Well, I think I'm going to need a bigger soup maker, that's for sure.
Right, well now put Tracy in a good mood by cutting up the pumpkin. I'm going to put her in a bad mood by getting under her feet to sort this AGA out. So this has been off all summer, and now it's time to get ready to put it back on next week when the temperatures drop. So she's just finished giving it a good clean. She's cleaned all the lids, so I'll put them on last. But now it's time to get round to stripping it apart and giving it a good clean out. Now it's original oil-fired AGA. It dates back to 1947, so it's pretty simple. It's a pretty simple setup the way they work. It's a gravity fed by oil, so we have a big tank outside which we fill up with kerosene, and then it fills up this reservoir here which has like a ball cock in it, which works like your cistern in your toilet. So when the oil comes out and the ball drops, it just keeps topping it up, and then it drip feeds it into a mechanism in here, which is, I'll show you when I get it apart, but it's got coils in there with a big long wick in it. So the oil just drip feeds it through, keeps the wick moist, and it just burns 24/7. So the good thing about it is it cooks all through the winter. It stays on even if there's a power cut, because doesn't rely on any electricity or anything like that. It's just gravity fed oil. It heats the kitchen, it dries the clothes, it does the cooking. The only bad thing is about it at the minute, oil's quite expensive. So wins and losses there. The main bad thing about taking these apart, to get to the component in there that holds the wick, you've got to get this big drum out here, where the only thing with this is it's a bit awkward where to put, because this is quite low for me to get in, and you've got to get in there and lift the drum out, and it is pretty heavy. So over the years it's getting heavier and heavier. Maybe I'm just getting weaker and weaker. So we'll get that out and then show you what's inside. Right, so just getting onto the top to strip it apart. This is the hot plate here, because the main drum here is above the fire down there. So that's the main hot plate, and then over here you've got a simmering plate, and then at the top it's just a 2 oven AGA, so you've got a roasting oven at the top, and just that acts as like a slow cooker. If you ever plug a slow cooker in, you just leave your briskets or your shoulder pork or anything like that, just goes in there, leave it overnight, and then it's done perfect. This one doesn't actually heat the water. I have seen them converted where they have water pipes coming out there and running to boilers, and they heat the water and stuff, but this one doesn't. This just purely does the cooking and like heats the kitchen, and then you've just got the flue up here going through the bathroom up out the ceiling. So all I have to do to get this out is you just take that ring off, take that middle bit off, they'll just get hoovered up and cleaned up, and then you've got to get right in here to get this big drum out. And it is a bit awkward, but if you badge your spinach, you should be able to get that out. Just put it down there. So if you look inside there, so this down here is the oil well, so you've got to take all these bits out of it, and then you have a little cap down there, a little bung there, and that's where the oil comes from. So the oil comes up through that hole, you'll soot it up, so that just wants a good clean out. I'll get the sandpaper on a little mechanism, and then all these wicks in it where it's burnt out from last year when we've turned it off, it burns out, so they all just go like that. So they all need replacing. It all needs a good clean out, but you've got to take that off. It's attached to the actual oil drum outside by a little pipe that goes out through there. So just take that off with a 16mm spanner, and then I'll get that out. So that's the actual main part of the AGA, the heating system itself. So that's the second part of the wick. So you can see it's all got cut in little holes there, which lets the oil come through these little sections here, and then it just fills up that, and then it just soaks through the wick, and then it just burns. So it's a pretty simple setup. So I'm going to take this down to my workshop, get it all cleaned out, and I'll just bring it back up, hook it all up, and then there's a little filter in there which I need to take out and clean, and then just give it a once over, a hoover out, and it'll be good to go whenever the weather drops.
Now while Stephen's out the way, I'm going to start getting some of this pumpkin pile or squash pile chopped up. I'm really pleased with this. I'm going to chop it into pieces about that size. I don't know, is that like an inch by an inch, something like that. I'm just going to get it all chopped up initially, and what I'm going to do is just chat you through what I did to make our lunch soup, which is exactly what I'm going to do with this. But instead of trying to recreate a video that I've already got some footage on, I'll just talk you through. Just remember that the ingredients that we used for the lunch were sweet potatoes and carrots, not squash and carrots, but I find that, as I said earlier, completely interchangeable. So I literally took 500 grams of sweet potato, all chopped up and peeled. One of the onions that you saw me getting in the other room that I said needed using, I actually took two of them and combined them so that it was one good sized onion, not an absolute giant like what we've got out there, and added in one of our homegrown chilies as well, chopped up. And just in a soup maker, if you've never seen them before, they're literally a kettle. Let me grab it. They literally look like a kettle, so there's nothing in there, and that's the top to it, and that goes on literally just like a kettle. Now, I'm all for the traditional way of making things, but also when time is of the essence and it's precious for all of us, I am not averse to using the odd gadget or two, and this soup maker honestly has really made a difference. I've known people that have had them and said, oh no, I didn't enjoy it, but for us in this chapter of life that we're in at the minute, it's really helping. And then all I did was added the sweet potato, the carrot, the onion, a chilli on the top, and as always some garlic. So I put in a clove of garlic in there, filled it up with stock too, with hot stock. So in the soup maker I generally use hot stock, filled it up to the max line with stock, which I just used 2 stock cubes for because I did have our own chicken stock, but because you're better off using hot stock in a soup maker, then I just made it up with some shop bought cubes. Not averse to doing that either when necessary, and popped it on the smooth function and left it and carried on, went about my business. And that is just the most simple thing to be able to do when you've got other things that you need to get to. So really chuffed. And the best thing was, it tasted absolutely delicious. I didn't expect it to taste that good. I thought I'd need to add cream or coconut milk, or the fact that I didn't saute the onions, etc., or add any other herbs and spices. I thought that that would hinder it, but it didn't. So I'm absolutely going to make some more of that, a few batches of that from this ton of pumpkin that we've got. The rest of it I'm just going to add in, the rest of the pumpkin I'm just going to put into some freezer bags for now and keep them in the fridge, and then I'll get to that over the next day or two. What I will do, people often ask me, do you blanch things? 9 times out of 10 I don't, because we aim to get to everything in the next few months at the latest. We don't like to leave things longer than a year. However, I can hear myself saying, that's not true, you have a lot of stuff that's longer than a year. We do, but that's not the ideal. And it's usually the meat, obviously, because we get a year's worth of meat in there. Whereas these vegetables that we're working with now are purely to see us through into the spring of next year, when the last thing you want to be eating, because the weather's changing, is hot soups and stews. This will be perfect in a freezer bag, just to take out of the freezer and just add into anything. I tend to add them into chili. I like them in chili con carne as well, and then that's instead of having the chili with rice or whatever, I'll just literally have a one pot with cubes of sweet potato, or in this case with pumpkin in. And Stephen has just said to me, we've never had a pumpkin pie before, it's not really a thing here in the UK, and he said, oh, do you reckon you could make one of them? I don't know. Yes, of course, but never made it before, so I'll certainly have to look into it. So that got me looking to see other methods of preservation for the pumpkin. You can cube it and pressure can it as well, so that's something that I will be looking into, so that we can have plenty ready to use on the shelves over winter. So I'm going to get on and finish chopping all of this while Stephen gets the AGA sorted, and then we'll come back to you at the end and it's all done. The dog's asked for a piece of this, right? So I've given her 2, and she's come back for a 3rd one, and those 2 are still on her bed.
Well, she asked.
Yeah. She came up and she asked, like dogs do.
Right, so I've just got all that cleaned off, put a new wick in there, that's ready to go back in. I've hoovered out all the fire, all the flue, sorry, all the fire, all the AGA, all the flue. So now I've just got 2 more filters to change. So I've got this one in the reservoir and the one outside. So all it is in here, if you're ever doing your own, you just have to take these 2 screws out there. Well, you don't have to take 2, just loosen one, take one out, and then you just flip that over, and there's like a long pencil filter in there. You just want to get that out and give it a good clean. But there will be some oil in here to come out, so you just put a little tub underneath, and then you won't have oil all over the place. So if you just loosen them both, and then you should just be able to take one out, and then slide that to the side, get your oil out. Might not be able to, actually might have to take the whole thing off because it won't come out otherwise. The only oil that should be in it is in this reservoir, so it's actually turned off at the back. There's a pipe that goes out the wall and to the actual oil drum, but that's turned off, so there should be no oil coming in. And even if there was, it's got a cap on here which turns this on and off, and that's shut off anyway. So there, that's emptied now. And then there's a little filter in there if you can get your fingers in. You can just take that out. I mean, it looks pretty clean, but you can see if you're dipping it in the oil there, you see you're getting muck coming out of it. I don't know if you can see that on camera. You can see all that scum in there. I mean, it's not a great deal, but you don't want that contaminating your oil and going through the pipes, because that'll clog up all your wick, and it won't burn clean. So the cleaner the filters you can get, the better. But that one doesn't look too bad. So I'll give it, oh sugar. I'll cut that bit out.
At least you remember the tub this time.
Right, so I've given that a good clean out. There you can see all the crap that's come out of it. So you don't want that in your oil system. So I'll give it a good clean out as best as we could. Give it a boiling hot water, ran it through, give it a good dry, because you don't want the oil mixing with water. So just put that one back where it come from, and then put the screws back in, tighten it up. And we've just got one more filter to do, and we can start putting it all back together. Right, so we've just got one more filter to change. For the first 2 or 3 years of living here, we used to get the AGA done once a year by a AGA engineer, and he never ever changed the filter in this. And then when we were talking to another guy, he said there was a filter in here, which is in just this little pot here. So the oil obviously feeds through there, that pipe goes through the filter, and then that goes into the house. But when we took it out, you couldn't even see that filter. It was absolutely thick, clattered up with scum. So last year as well, the AGA wasn't burning as hot as it should have been. So this year we've had some additive put in our oil. I mean, this is a 2,500 litre tank, and I think we got 500 or 1,000 litres delivered. And we put a bottle of additive that we were recommended to put in with it. So it should make the oil a lot cleaner that goes through into the AGA. So hopefully this year we should have no problems with it. When we light it, it should stay on. So all we have to do to get this out is just turn the oil off by that tap there, stop it coming out, undo that reservoir there, and there should be a filter like that in, and well, hopefully it'll be pretty clean, but we'll see. Well, stop. I didn't actually turn the tap off. Right, well, I turned off that valve there, but I didn't turn off the actual tap that comes out of the oil, so I've lost a little bit there, but anyway, it's stopped now. So just loosen that. That's just what's sat in the reservoir, what's coming out there. Right. And there's all that scumming clogged up there. At least the filter's working. So, and inside there you can see it's all a bit crappy, so we'll just give that a clean out. So as you can see there, that's the clean one, that's the dirty one. We will just steep that one in boiling water and clean it out, and we're just going to put the fresh one in for this year. So that's that one in there. Tighten that on, just give it a little nip up, tighten that back up, and that, and then turn everything on, make sure it's nothing's leaking, and then all you do to fill that up is just to release that, just to let it filter the top. It's like an air valve, and then when the oil starts coming out of there, the main reservoir's full and you won't get an airlock in the pipe. There you go. So now the oil started to come through, that means it's totally full, there's no air in it. So then we just tighten that back up, and then once we open the valve in the house, there should be no air bubbles go through the pipe and down into the house and cause a problem that way. So now we'll go and put the AGA back together, and then we're done. You just pull that cloth from underneath. Ready now. She's in. Right. There we go. All the filters changed, all hoovered out, all cleaned up and put back together. She doesn't look bad for a 77-year-old. So it's all ready now for the cold weather to come, and we'll just flick it back on.
Well, those last video clips were Sunday at about 4 o'clock, just before it got dark, and I was going to head on and show you what I was getting done with the pumpkin and the squash. And then Stephen shouted to me and said, "Tracy, come outside, the dog's not very well." The irony being that it was the dog that we started the video with, which is Annie here. Don't worry, she hasn't passed away or anything like that, but we have had a very traumatic week with her. So when he said she wasn't very well, I went outside to see what he meant, and she had vomited twice outside, which isn't unusual for farm dogs, especially when they've been outside with us on the morning and goodness knows what they've been eating. They've been in the sheep and everything. They're all wormed and up to date, all their injections that they need, so had no concerns from that point of view, and didn't think too much of a vomiting. As I say, they do it often when they get their noses into places that they shouldn't. However, I think if you're a dog owner, you'll know that you can be very tuned into how your dogs are, and there was a couple of signs that had us worried about Annie. And with our daughter Grace training to be a veterinary care nurse, she's just actually qualified to be on her first year to be a VCA veterinary care assistant, so she's now allowed to move on and has just started on her 2-year course to be the veterinary care nurse, which I'm super proud of. But Grace also noticed some signs in Annie that were just a little bit off. These dogs can look quite sad, being a bull mastiff. Sometimes they can look quite sad, and they're very quiet dogs, very you know, lazy to some degree. Anyway, we picked up on these signs, and Grace went to work actually in the vets on the Monday, and I stayed in touch with her on the morning and said, something's not right here. We did no extra filming on Sunday night because of this. I wanted to prioritise the dog. And then essentially things went downhill from there. So we had an afternoon appointment for Annie just to get her weighed, because she appeared to us to have lost weight over the last few months. But because she's got so much skin, it's difficult to tell because the skin just kind of sits over and her skin's quite thick. Am I calling you fat? I'm not. So can you see her skin there? It's quite thick. So even though she was losing fat underneath, it was hard to tell. And even when you put your hands on to feel a ribbon of quality, there's still a lot of skin there. So the only way to tell was to get her on the scales. And then as Monday progressed, she went downhill in that I just wasn't comfortable. She couldn't sit comfortably. Every time she lay down, she took a long time to get comfortable, etc, etc. And the reason I'm explaining this is to just raise awareness for it for female dogs that aren't spayed. We were going to breed from Annie, which is why she wasn't spayed, and we decided against that for a variety of reasons. And then she was, in our eyes, the concern of spaying her as she's older, she's classed as an old bull mastiff these days, just outweighed that it was the risk at what we thought at the time was too much risk to get her spayed. So we decided against that, and that was a mistake looking back, but we learned from our mistakes. So anyway, Annie went in to the vets earlier on at lunchtime. We managed to get a space, and they didn't even do the test that they were going to do initially. They just said we need to scan her for pyometra. and the scan wasn't on for, it was on for a couple of seconds before the vet looked at me and said, she's got pyometra. And if you don't know what that is, it's a very dangerous infection of female dogs. It's of the uterus, I believe. And there's an open pyometra and a closed pyometra, the worst one being closed, which is what Annie had. So no visible signs of any infection coming out of her. So we'll leave that there. You can use your imagination to how that would happen. All of the infection was trapped inside her, and it was at a point where they think it had been brewing for such a while, but obviously no external signs that we saw, and there was no change in her character except for the day that we took her in. And that could have then got to the point where it burst inside her, and that's obviously a huge concern. And apparently after that, and apologies if this upsets anybody, because I know that a lot of people have gone through this and have lost dogs to this, so we're truly sorry if that's happened to you. But the closed pyometra was inside her, and she was literally hours away from it bursting. So we didn't know this obviously at the time when we were taking her down to the vets. The vet scanned her and said she needs to go in for emergency surgery now, this minute. So we took her over to where we got the emergency. She looked absolutely fine still in herself. Her ears were up, she was alert. She just kept doing these little things that made me think something's not right. But to an untrained eye, so to speak, somebody that doesn't know her or maybe doesn't have dogs, she would have looked absolutely fine. So we took her straight over to where they performed the emergency surgery. It was later on in the afternoon by this point, and then we just stayed with her while she got all different tests and things done. They checked her bloods with her being so old as well, so old for a bull mastiff. They were fine, thankfully. They were concerned if she, going under the anaesthetic, if there was a problem with the kidneys or anything, that she wouldn't be able to come out of it. Anyways, thankfully everything was absolutely fine. The surgery the surgery was successful. I'm going to give you a warning now. I'll put on the screen in a second what was taken out of her, and it was absolutely huge. And I've been in touch with a few people who have had very similar, and have also got very similar photos, so some people know what this is like. It's frightening how much they took out from this lady's inside, and everything that they took out was just infection. And again, a warning of what I'm about to say. When it was removed, it burst. The vet said that's how close it was to bursting inside it. It actually burst in the surgery. They got her stitched back up, a really big major operation, stitched her back up from the inside out, and let her recover. And unfortunately she had to stay, unfortunately for us, but fortunately for her in terms of from a recovery point of view, she had to stay in the vets overnight. And then I'm laughing because the next morning they rang me, and after a bad night, to be quite honest, she didn't recover she wasn't as pain-free as they'd hoped. They needed to give her more medication than what they'd anticipated. So once we got over that and they were then happy enough to call me and say she can come home, I went down and I was like, well, where is she? Because they were supposed to bring her. And they said, you're going to have to come and get her. She's so stubborn, she won't get out of the kennel. My goodness me, the face that was on this lady when I went in to pick her up, it was heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. So I shed even more tears. More tears have been shed this week than in a long time. Anyway, she saw me, and then after a second or two of being convinced, she came out. And they'd been trying like for absolutely ages on the morning to get her out. Anyways, we got her home, and literally all of this week, that was on Tuesday she came home. So all of this week she's had to have pretty much 24/7 observation. It's reducing now that she's had a checkup with the vet nurse, the senior vet nurse, and said she's absolutely fine. You know, so on a night now, sleeping back upstairs, we were on the sofa for the first night and making sure that she was not moving around too quickly, not doing anything that she didn't that would risk rupturing the stitches, etc. But as you can see, she's quite happy just sleeping at the moment. She's a little bit subdued sometimes, but she's still on pain relief, etc. But the good news is the operation was a success. She is recovering well, and that's all that matters at the moment. So this video is not the ending that we expected, but the irony is we don't normally start the videos with Annie on them, and we did for this one and talked about her a little bit, and then, you know, she became the star of the show for all the wrong reasons. So we're going to leave her rest now, but I just wanted to bring you up to speed and hopefully raise a little bit of awareness, because we hadn't heard of this prior to having a female dog. We've had male dogs all of our lives, and this is a really serious disease, a really serious problem that can be prevented. So if you're not breeding from them, then Spain's the way forward. And if we ever do get another female dog in the future, we'll be looking to do that. So that's it from us. It's a good ending in the end, but as we say, mistakes happen with Stephen and the oil spilling everywhere, and preventable things with the dogs, and a lot more mistakes to boot. I'm absolutely sure of that. So thank you very much for watching. If you've stuck with me through this long chatty discussion at the end, I appreciate that. We will be back with another video next week, if not before. Who knows what life's going to throw at us before then. Take care everyone, we'll see you later.